To start this video, let's do a little bit of scene setting, if you will. Close your eyes and picture the year 2007 in your head. How old were you? What did you look like? What was the center of your world? Well, if you're of a similar age to me, you would have been a kid in 2007. The center of my world? Well, I don't know about you, but mine was my coveted silver Nintendo DS Lite. I played a lot of titles in my time as a Nintendo girly, including Nintendogs, The Sims 2 Castaway, and that weird brain training game that surprisingly did really well. But then I stumbled across a little game called Imagine Teacher. Hello, welcome to today's video. I am Otter, or Tilly, and today we are doing a deep dive into Ubisoft's Imagine series. Not really a deep dive, but more of an analysis as to whether they were girly empowerment or just sexist shovelware. These games have been in the back of my mind ever since I first played them. I've seen a couple of videos floating around on YouTube about this topic, but never really any that questioned the morality of these games. If you enjoy this video today and you want to see more, do not hesitate to like and subscribe. Not only does it really help out my channel, but it also lets me know that I'm making the right type of content and I will love you forever. But without further ado, let's get on into the video. So, as mentioned in the sort of title of this video, Ubisoft are actually the creators of the Imagine series. I didn't realise this until a couple of years ago, and it boggles my mind that a company that has produced games such as Assassin's Creed and has supported the Tom Clancy series has also produced the Imagine games. So this game series was announced in 2007, but Ubisoft began their gaming journey way before then. Ubisoft itself entered the tech industry in the 1980s when five brothers, Christian, Claude, Gerard, Michael, and Yves, began selling computer hardware from their bedroom and later realized the growing prominence of video games. The company soon grew, and by the late 1990s, it had offices worldwide. Let's jump forward to 2007. Ubisoft is a giant in the video gaming world, and they were about to drop their most exciting title yet. No. Not Assassin's Creed, you silly. Imagine MasterChef, of course. So the whole reason why Ubisoft wanted to create this Imagine series was because they saw a lack of content for girls in the gaming industry. So apparently games for girls is a whole genre of its own, and it was coined in the 1990s to get girls into gaming. It began with Pac-Man, as the creator of Pac-Man states, "The reason I created Pac-Man was because we wanted to attract female gamers. Back in the day, we only had arcade games that men liked to play. Most of them were barbarous games where you kill aliens or something. There was no game for women." We have to remember that the world back then was a very different place. The perspective to women's place in society was very different to how it is now. And obviously, we all know now that the stereotype of women not enjoying FPS or violent games is completely incorrect. So like Iwatani and Pac-Man, Ubisoft decided to branch into the girls game genre. And at the 2007 Electronic Entertainment Expo, Ubisoft announced their new series. Today at the Electronic Entertainment Expo, Ubisoft, one of the world's largest video game publishers, announced its all-new Imagine series of video games targeted at girls ages 6 to 14 years old. The Imagine line allows girls to explore their favorite interests and hobbies, as indicated in extensive lifestyle research on this audience, in an interactive and entertaining way. Ubisoft's Imagine series is part of the company's strategic expansion into the casual video game market. I would really love to see what this extensive lifestyle research was. Just a disclaimer before we get into the more research and content heavy part of this role, where a lot of my personal opinions will slip out. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having any of these jobs or doing any of these hobbies. Fashion designing is an extremely competitive and brutal field that requires bucket loads of creativity, problem solving, and resilience to be a success. Teaching can be an energy draining job and is notorious for its fast-paced training, never-ending workload, and pay. I should know. I work in the education industry. There's nothing necessarily wrong with any of the roles offered in the titles themselves, but more how these games are represented through Ubisoft's gameplay and ideas. Now, I'm also aware that Ubisoft use a lot of third-party companies to help with the production, design, etc. of these games, but it's still under Ubisoft's branding ultimately, so I feel like we can contribute a lot of these ideas to Ubisoft. Now, am I looking and thinking way too deeply into a collection of crappy glitter-coated titles that were never destined to be record-breaking or influential? Probably, but I do think it is really interesting to look at these games through a critical lens with hindsight. Whilst making this video, I have come to realise that there is a lot more video game titles in this series than I thought there was. So whilst I will be discussing some notable mentions, I won't be deep diving into all of the titles, but if that is something you'd like to see or you'd like me to play a particular title, let me know down in the comments below and I can make that happen for you. But now that we've delved a little bit into the background and history of the Imagine series and Ubisoft, let's get into the actual content that we were offered, starting at the very beginning. So obviously, as we've already discussed, the Imagine series began in 2007, and the first titles to be released were announced at the Electronic Entertainment Expo of the same year. Now, these titles were Imagine MasterChef, Imagine Fashion Designer, Imagine Animal Doctor, which were all released in October of 2007. A little later this year also came Babies, with a Z, Babies. And for the first releases of a new series, let me tell you, they had some real interesting picks. First off, Imagine MasterChef wasn't one that I remembered playing until I was looking at some footage of the gameplay on YouTube. I realised that it had a different title in the EU, which happens a lot with these games. And the EU release for this title was Imagine Happy Cooking, which I also feel like is a more suitable title for the game and what you experience. In terms of gameplay, it's fairly simple and really not very challenging. It's essentially just pointing and clicking for the majority of the game and is basically a Cooking Mama ripoff. However, aesthetically to me, the game is actually really pretty and I love the cute anime/kawaii aesthetic that the game has. And also with this game, I do feel like it's kind of educational. You learn about the different utensils in the kitchen and how to use them, and then also when you're making the recipes, you obviously are learning what food is going in, as they're all clearly labelled and you add them according to the recipe and how to cook the meal that you're cooking. I don't know why that took me so many words. I remember enjoying this game as a kid, but it had some sort of weird fantasy plot, which I'm assuming was to make the game a little bit more interesting. Her, Teddy comes to life, and this wishing star grants her her wish of being able to cook her dad, who is around traveling and coming back, like a stunning meal. I don't know why her Teddy had to come alive for that, or why she needed this wishing star to bring her a pro chef. But it is what it is, and you know what? I'm not even mad about it. It's creative, and that doesn't happen a lot in these games, so let's take it where they come. So 1 out of 3 of the initial game releases was actually pretty decent. Now moving on to Imagine Fashion Designer. They could not have designed this game any uglier. I will say, give credit where it's due, the game has a lot of customization. You don't make clothes per se, but you do get to choose different patterns and color schemes for different pieces. But other than that, it's a case of pointing and clicking. There's no real plot to drive you through or to engage you with anything you're doing. There's no sort of consequence either, so there's no want to go back and sort of fix the mistakes that you made. You're just stuck in an endless loop of soulless assignments given to you by some random people again and again and again and again and again until the credits finally roll. And like I said, this game is so ugly. And for a fashion designer game, you'd wonder why. You really have to wonder why. There's so much going on screen. There's crashing colors. The models themselves look terrifying, and this is not just me, that's not just my opinion, this is lots of people's opinions. These models, I think they meant to sort of echo Bratz dolls, which were really popular at the time, but if anything, they echo Sleep Paralysis Demon. Also, the music is soul draining. It is the same piece of tacky piano electronica hip music that you've ever heard in your entire life, and it plays on repeat on and on. And then you also have to like direct a model down a catwalk, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm under the assumption that that's not the fashion designer's job, right? It had way more of a focus on the models and the runway rather than the actual fashion designing. So I think they sort of just marketed this wrong, and instead of marketing it as a fashion designer, it maybe should have been like runway manager, runway director, model agency, whatever. I don't know, just not fashion designer, because that's not what this game is. I cannot see a girl over the age of 9 enjoying this for more than half an hour max. Like maybe a younger player who doesn't want to engage with much text because they can't read yet. Now imagine Animal Doctor kind of sits in the middle of both these games. It's kind of challenging actually. I don't think I ever played this one, but watching gameplay, the timer on the mini games goes so quickly. The adult player who is like doing the playthrough actually nearly fails all of the mini games because they're running out of time. And there is a good variety of mini games in this one. You don't do the same thing for every animal. There is a variety of different illnesses / conditions that the animals have that are brought to your hospital. But on that note, I have no clue what these pet owners are doing to their pets, because I think when watching some playthroughs, there was a cat who had mange, and I'm pretty sure that you only get mange if you're like a homeless cat on the streets, abandoned, not eating, you've been bitten by a flea or some shit and it's given you mange. Like, what is this pet owner doing to their pet? I think we should be taking the animals away from these owners, not treating them and giving them back. So in this game, you play this main character who has a really odd face.
Brother,
You name her after you, but you can't really customize her other than her clothes. And she lives in this house, which I'm assuming is her nan's old hospital or something, with her granddad and her cousin. I have no idea where her parents are. And her nan just sort of gives her like emotional support, I guess. There's also a variety of actual things to do other than just mini games in this game. There's like a point and click interactive map, so you actually know what world your character is living in, and there's like a third person walk around, not open world, but like load screen based places where you can actually like walk your character up to their reception desk, so it's a lot more engaging in that respect. Unlike in fashion designers with the freaking death loop of constant assignments given to you by random people, they're actually doing something here. I also, one of the highlights of this game was that the treatment for fleas was literally just to blow into your DS and blow the fleas off the animal. Besides that, there is actually a lot of really intense medical terms named, which I think is a positive thing, as it's not really insulting the intelligence of girls. It like names that it's a stethoscope, doesn't outrightly explain what it is, but gives the player the opportunity to go away and maybe research that. Again, the 3D aspects of this game are not great, but they're also not as terrifying or as garish as Fashion Designer. A little bit in between both. It's not awful, also not perfect. It's a little bit rough around the edges, but for one of the initial release games, not too shabby. Now, imagine Babies with a Z. It wasn't one of the original trio to be announced in the first lineup, and I think that's maybe because it could have been a little bit controversial. I can't say that word. Controversial? Controversial. 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 That'll do. I remember playing this game as a kid and I ate it up because I don't think I really understood what was going on, but now as an adult reflecting on it, I'm kind of worried for the girl in this game. So this girl is left to care for her grandma's house. We don't know how old she is. She looks to be of a teenage age, again reflecting the sort of Bratz design. And yeah, she's just left to care for her grandma's house. And then apparently everyone's neighborhood children. Like babies as well, not like kids who can look after themselves. Like when I was a teenager, like 16, 17, I babysat for kids aged like 7 and upwards, but to be left with a baby, I wouldn't have a clue. So the care of the babies is essentially through like point and click mini games, starting with one, and then you slowly have like a whole roster of random babies who are assigned to you through like word of mouth by the parents. The gameplay is really, really repetitive and easy, so not very engaging for the elder bracket of the target audience. It's fun and like challenging for the first couple of times, but then it begins to feel like a chore. Which is funny, because that's exactly what you're doing. Other than looking after the babies, you also have house duties to sort of do. So you have to mow the lawn, do the dishes, cook, so you make like fresh baby food for the babies. And I really think that this game would have been better titled Housewife Simulator rather than Babies with a Z. I imagine the decision for Babies with a Z was because naming a game Housewife Simulator or Mother Simulator doesn't really sit well. Also, on a side note, I know I kind of shat on the 3D graphic design in the last couple of games, but I actually really think the babies are quite cute in these games. And in other weird baby games that were coming out at the time, the babies are kind of scary, but in this one, I feel like they kind of nailed it. But the 2D UI that like sits when you're like walking around the house, I don't know why, but it really makes me feel uncomfortable. It's got like this weird liminal style, which also feels kind of dark and like foreboding. I don't know if anyone else gets that. Let me know if you do, but it just, I don't know. And that was it for 2007 and the beginning of the Imagine series. And what a start, what a mixed start. And I think it's really safe to say that what occurred in 2007 when the Imagine series was announced really does forebode the future of the Imagine series over the next 6 years. Now, 2008 was a big year for the Imagine series. We saw a whopping total of 15 titles being released this year for the Imagine series. Imagine Figure Skater, Imagine Rockstar, Imagine Teacher, Imagine My Secret World, Imagine Babysitters, Imagine Fashion Designer New York, Imagine Champion Rider, Imagine Pet Hospital, Imagine Interior Design, Imagine Wedding Designer, Imagine Party Babies with a Z, Imagine Ballet Star, Imagine Movie Star, Imagine Gymnast. Personally, I have played Imagine Ballet Star, My Secret World, and Imagine Teacher. And I only like 2 of those games, and I'm gonna let you guess which. So the majority of the games that were released in 2007 sort of follow suit to the point and click gameplay, but they just tend to look a little bit better in quality. We also see some sort of sequels here. I don't know whether they were intended to be sequels or remakes. So we have Babysitters, which is very, very similar to Babies of 2007. Instead of being in a single house, you sort of walk around and go to people's different houses and babysit their children instead of them coming to you. It's a lot less focused on the housewife simulation. As mentioned, we also had a new fashion designer game. So we had Fashion Designer New York, which I believe also released on PC. As well as DS, and this one is a huge upgrade on the original Fashion Designer game in the initial release. So the new Fashion Designer game, Fashion Designer New York, has a design style which really echoes the My Scene girls. I'm not sure if they were out at this time, but I remember them being quite popular when I was a kid. They were like a competitor for the Bratz and Barbie. And you also hold the DS on its side to play this game, which I think works a lot better and is a more innovative way to use the DS console. Looking at these 2 titles, I'm not really sure why they weren't released as originals. I assume they were rushing maybe to get titles out for the Entertainment Expo. We also see our first Imagine Sports game. Sometimes the Imagine Sports games I feel are the cream of the crop. And then I did research and I found some and I was like, this ain't it. But for the ones that are good, they usually had a decent storyline following the development of the main character, who is normally you or another named one who you play as. And as the game is based around a sport, I feel like it gave the player more drive to play the game. as you are playing in competitions and tournaments. You have rivals and best friends and coaches, and you go to different places and you have to like impress your family. There's so many layers to these sports games, especially like imagine figure skater and imagine ballet dancer. These games I would probably actually play again now. And although the gameplay could sometimes be repetitive with the pointing and clicking, dragging of the stylus, it had that gameplay life simulation aspect behind it and the drive for the competitive wins that had like an actual consequence if you lost them, that really engaged players of all ages. Some of the sports games also had that really nice anime/kawaii style, which I think really elevates the visual quality of these games. However, the one sports game I cannot get with from 2008 is Champion Rider. The Wii release, or maybe it was PC release, is a lot better. The graphics are slightly better, even if the character voice lines kind of sound like early AI.
Yeah, I understand.
But Imagine Champion Rider for DS has a total playtime of 1.5 hours, and there is no save option. So you are made to play and sit this game and expected to play and sit this game in an hour and a half. Otherwise, if you have to turn your DS off and go again, you have to start the game from the beginning. I watched a limited amount of gameplay for this game and I already knew the storyline. What the fuck are we paying for? Why would you spend your time, money, effort, budget making a game this dog shit? The 3D models and character designs aren't even that good. Moving on, before I get too riled up. Now, there is some outliers to the generic point and click games during 2007. Imagine Party Babies is more of a multiplayer party game which was only released on Wii. It's not bad by any stretch, but it's kind of lackluster and echoes the like Wii Party mini games, and is only really worth playing with other people. And another, which is really random and I have also played, is Imagine My Secret World. Now, I'm not really sure if you can say that I played this game because it's more of a digital journal/diary than a game. The marketing for this as well absolutely sends me. There's like 3 teenage girls playing on the DS's together there. All 3 of them have got pink DS lights and they're all playing it together, writing in their journals, playing mini games, and like gossiping. And I love that this narrative of slumber parties/sleepovers was a thing, because if you know, you know, this is not what happens at sleepovers. I suppose there is some random mini games, like really low quality mini games, which you probably wouldn't play for more than like 10 minutes. So I guess you could say that you would play it, but there's definitely much more focus on the sticker placing and journaling than actual gameplay. I also remember as a kid when I had this, I made a diary and I was so like determined to stick to it, but you put a passcode before you like entered it and I forgot that passcode, and there's no way to fix that unless you like restart your entire game and go from scratch, in which case the whole point of it being a diary/journal is eradicated. I do also think it's kind of innovative for them to make the DS multifunctional as more than a console just to play games on, to use it as a diary, but I do really wonder what sort of people, and if anyone, actually use this as their daily diary. So those are a couple of outliers that I sort of picked up on from the year 2008 in the Imagine series. I also know that Wedding Designer is probably one of the worst games in this series. We have nearly a 50-50 split of good to bad games. So the biggest year for Imagine was definitely 2009, including Imagine My Restaurant, Imagine Fashion Party for Wii, Imagine Cheerleader, Imagine Ice Champions, Imagine Family Doctor, Imagine Makeup Artist, Imagine Music Fest, Imagine Boutique Owner, Imagine Soccer Captain, Imagine Teacher Class Trip, Imagine Detective, Imagine Party Planner, Imagine Salon Stylist, Imagine Reporter, Imagine Zookeeper, Imagine Artist, Imagine Fashion Designer World Tour, and Imagine Rescue Vet. 8 of the 18 of these games were released in the final quarter, which I assume was for the holiday season, so it'll be interesting to see the quality of these games. Now, I do feel like there is a huge variety of hobbies / interests in this year, including some which are sequels / remakes from years before. For example, we had Imagine Class Teacher School Trip, which was dropped in August of 2009. When looking at the Imagine Teacher game, I really wish that they had stuck with the original cast and group of children that they had for the sequel Imagine Teacher Class Trip. I feel like it would sort of carry on that storyline that you played through with Imagine Teacher and actually give more interest in a choice of game context, which is naturally very limiting. So I feel like there's only so much you can have on a school trip. School trips were actually a part of the Imagine Teacher game. Like, you could schedule in a school trip and there would be like a teeny tiny cutscene and that's it. And I think that really speaks for what a school trip can give in a game. And it's just really not very engaging at all. Watching the playthrough, I can really tell that you wouldn't get much connection with the characters that you are playing as or with the children like you did for Imagine Teacher. Despite this, I do really like the design and aesthetic of the game. It feels really high quality compared to other sort of flat 2D animation that we've seen in the Imagine series before. The other sequel that we see in this year is yet again another fashion designer game, and it is Imagine Fashion Designer World Tour. Like New York before, this one is again played vertically with the DS on its side, and this really helps to show off the obscenely unattainable body types that we see on the models in this game. I feel like we also went from bad to good to worse on the character design element. I don't know why they chose to give the female characters these horrific Karen haircuts. They are off-putting, weird, and the way they have no nose and then like teeny tiny shiny lips is really, really odd. In terms of more original titles for this year, we have some which are actually less female dominated, in that we got Detective, Reporter, and Music Fest. So obviously, whilst there is women in these industries, and there has been for years and years and years, they often exude a masculine vibe and are traditionally more male dominated, but I do wish that they'd given them more time and effort. Imagine Detective is like your classic crime solving duo. You've got the gal with her like little sidekick, and she's going around and solving the town's mysteries. Whilst the mysteries themselves don't hold much weight, they are like imaginative and original, I guess, and are made suitable for a 6 to 14 age range. But the thing with the main character is that she has such a I'm not like other girls perspective, and you can really tell that this is written by elder men and women who have no clue what it's like to be a teenager in the mid 2000s. The design, again, I feel like we've gone backwards. I really don't think we should be going backwards. Reporter is the most shovelware title I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know if it has any plot. I've not found any footage of anyone playing this game through. I've only ever seen trailers. It just seems like a collection of mini games of this generic female character going around to different locations and reporting on stuff that has happened in her neighborhood. It also incorporates the camera that came with the DSi, and you can like take photographs as a reporter with yourself in the image or like the world around you, which I think is kind of cool, but as the camera function of the DSi didn't have a great reputation, I don't think this really helped in the game's favor at all. And again, we have another music game, Music Fest, which is a rhythm game that has no rhythm. Another which with hindsight makes me giggle looking at it is Imagine Boutique. This came out in May of 2009, and I remember playing this one and absolutely loving it. But looking at it now, I realized that my illusion of working in retail being fun was created by this game. It really hides what working in retail actually is, and has this really bizarre, depressing, solemn music playing in the background, which sounds more like a character is dying in a movie. So Soccer Champion was another one of those ones that was more male dominated. The design of the game and the aesthetic is not overly feminine, which I think is great. It's really like more muted and like ambiguous, which I think is actually really progressive for Ubisoft at the time. For the games that didn't do very well, none of them really have any defining qualities other than being point and click games of their individual hobby/interest. Maybe it's this or the overall lack of interest in handheld consoles at the time that led to the Imagine series' inevitable downfall. I feel like we can safely say that the Imagine series clearly shows the beginning of its death in 2010. Only 3 games were released this year, which is a huge decline in output given what we saw in 2008 and 2009. One of the 3 games that released was a spin-off, being Imagine Babies with Z Fashion, in which you care and dress babies that essentially work for a modeling agency and are given to you to be looked after by their parents, and you put them in outfits and then they walk along a catwalk and get photographed by loads of random people and then get told whether they're dressed like shit or not. In all serious though, I do think that Babies was Ubisoft's best-selling franchise in the Imagine series, as that and Fashion Designer have the most spin-offs/sequels than any other game series title in the Imagine series. And I wonder if they did Imagine Babies Fashion or Imagine Fashion Babies with Z, whatever it is, to sort of combine the two and try and hit that market with one game instead of 2 games. I don't know if anyone has data or knows how to access the data for like how many units the Imagine game sold or anything like that. Please let me know if you do, because I would be really, really interested in looking at those. And the other 2 games that were released this year were Resort Owner and Imagine Sweet 16. And Imagine Sweet 16 is exactly what you think it is. Resort Owner is a mid-tier, essentially easy resort builder, with like some mini games related to vacationing and being on holiday at a hotel. Like there's one mini game where you have to drive the boat, which like your guests are jet skiing on behind. Jet skiing? No, that's not the word. I can't think of the word. I'll put it here. Whatever sport that is, that's what you're driving the boat for. It's not bad. Aesthetically, it looks okay. It could have been designed a little bit nicer. And then there's Sweet 16, which is my personal hell. Also, when did Sweet 16 become a hobby or an interest? Like, what girls in their extensive lifestyle research were like, oh my god, one of my favorite hobbies or interests is Sweet 16 birthday parties. Can't wait for that. You know that guy who makes the entire history of the world video, and he's like, let's make a religion of that. That, but with video games. Like, I'm honestly so confused with this Sweet 16 game. How did they come up with the premise of it, and why? You essentially run different 16-year-olds Sweet 16 parties and make sure that guests are having a good time by like dragging them to different things that you've got set up at this party. And then also there's party drama. Whoa! Of course girls gossip and bitch and fall out. That's all they ever do at parties. No one actually has fun. And it's your job as the young girl that you are to resolve this party drama. I feel like the only girls that are really interested or thinking about I feel like the only girls that would be interested about or thinking about their Sweet 16 birthday parties would be girls like above the age of 10. But this game and the gameplay is definitely not made with girls of that age in mind. And what a way to see out 2010, because that was the final game they released this year. I think by this point, you can really tell that Ubisoft was running out of steam with the Imagine series. 2011 had even less titles released, with a stunning 2, and they were essentially just remakes/ports. We'd Imagine Animal Doctor Vet Care Center. I don't know why they had to chuck so many words into that title. It's like they wanted to make another animal game, but didn't want it to sound like any of the other 500 animal games that they had released at the time. And we got another fashion designer game, but this time it's called Fashion Stylist, which I think is a lot more appropriate of a name for what you actually accomplish in those titles. Moving very swiftly on to 2012, we see another 2 fashion games. Why do we need more fashion games? So we saw Imagine Fashion Life and Imagine Fashion World 3D. And we also got another babies game with a Z, but this time in the stunning visuals of a Nintendo 3D. And last but not least, moving on to 2013. That's just, what was the game I was probably most angry about, looking back? Was it Champion Rider? What the fuck are we paying for? I think it was. Their final release, Ubisoft's final Imagine series girl gaming genre game, was Imagine Champion Rider 3DS. Tell me why anyone thought this would be a good economic idea. They literally revived one of their worst titles at the worst time. Like, don't get me wrong, the 3DS sold fairly well, and the gimmick of having 3D really drew in audiences and buyers for the 3DS. I think for 90% of the time I was actively playing my 3DS, I never actually used it because it gave me fat headaches and you had to hold it like 30 centimeters away from your face. And who does that? No one. Not me. And I think this definitely helped speed up the death of the Ubisoft Imagine series. I do think that Ubisoft were maybe hoping for a Imagine series revival with the new 3D element of the 3DS, but I think it just did the opposite. At the time as well, there was a lack of interest in handheld consoles anyway. There was the whole sort of like PlayStation versus Xbox thing going on, which was much more sensationalized and captured in mainstream media than anything that was happening in the console handheld market. In a blanket statement, I think that Ubisoft's lack of care, attention, and drive to create anything of any real value that matched other DS titles being released at the time really solidified the Imagine series' death. So, let's conclude. Let's start with the good. So, there's lots of choice and variation of hobbies in the Imagine series that some girls have obviously been interested in, and we also did see some less feminine-centric ones like the detective game, the soccer champion game, which in their in-real-life fields were less female-dominated, so it's great that they were promoting those careers. Some of the games are well-designed and are lovely to look at, e.g. ballet dancer, or teacher, or soccer champion. Those games were actually nice to play and looked fun to play through the footage that I found online. And on the whole, I do think that it's great that Ubisoft picked up on that girls were being sort of left out in the gaming industry, although not an original thought, given that the sort of initial idea of creating games for girls and women was initiated with Pac-Man. I do think it's great that a company that was as big as Ubisoft at the time was doing something to proactively draw girls into the gaming industry. However, and that is a big however, there's the obvious games that have really horrific, horrible design and aesthetic choices. And I think the worst culprits for this overall are Imagine Fashion Designer, Imagine Cheerleader, and Imagine Gymnast, just to name a few. But we also have the insulting gameplay that is dull, soulless, and boring. Most games require no initiative or thought processing at all. I'm willing to bet that you could probably play 90% of the Imagine series titles with your eyes closed and still see the end credits rolling when you opened your eyes. And I just think it's so sad that people thought that this is what girls who gamed deserved at the time. Another key thing that I've sort of picked up on as I was researching and talking about the series is the target audience for this was 16 to 14-year-old girls. As there is no indication for the wide array of games specifically on them that they were meant for a particular age group, we can assume that these games are meant to cover all of these ages. So every game that they dropped was meant to be playable for 6-year-old girls to 14-year-old girls. Whilst this is not an inherently sexist decision, I feel like there could be some sort of underlying belief that a 6-year-old girl and a 14-year-old girl could be interested in the same thing. But I feel like it's more hope that anyone from the given age range would buy the games, not knowing that it actually wouldn't be of any value or entertainment to them, which would lead to more sales and income for Ubisoft to bring out more Imagine series titles. So to sum up my feelings and analysis on why the Imagine series exists in the first place, let's take a look back as to why Ubisoft created this series. Helen Juget, I'm really sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, who was Senior Director of Marketing at Ubisoft at the time, said this: Ubisoft is excited to finally offer young girls a line of games that give them the chance to explore their hobbies and interests in interactive and creative experiences. Our consumer research revealed that the young girls market has been relatively overlooked. We are happy to introduce a variety of titles relevant to what girls in this age group have indicated they are most interested in. Obviously, they have put out a variety of titles, hobbies, interests that cover a large range of what girls could have been interested in given their extensive lifestyle research. And though they started off with some okay titles, it only ever went downhill from there. And we've seen that by looking at the titles that were released year by year. And let me ask you this, Ubisoft of 2007. If you really feel that girls are being overlooked and left out in the gaming industry, why not give them good quality, enriching games instead of this shovelware shit that insults the intelligence and capabilities of 6 to 14-year-old girls? Where was the effort to provide girls with games that equaled the quality of casual games more promoted towards a male audience? Is it a budgeting issue, poor planning, or a lack of time? Or given how quickly these titles were released, is it really a money-making plan just to monetize on the interests of girls in the 2000s? I just don't see why the series had to be so mixed in its quality and content when you look at Ubisoft's other titles and none of them ever hit a bar this low. As IGN's Joshua Clark puts it, Ubisoft's Imagine brand has yielded a remarkable amount of titles that vary wildly in overall quality and design. On one end of the spectrum, there are games like Imagine Wedding Designer, a boring and soulish cash-in. Then there are surprise hits that actually turned out pretty darn well. Personally, to me, it just seems like Ubisoft wanted to tick some boxes and make some more money to put towards the games that they felt were more important and that they took more seriously. And although we do need to remember that the Imagine series is a product of its time. And at the end of the day, Ubisoft is a game publishing company that just wants to make money and keep up with the ever-evolving and growing gaming industry of the mid-2000s. But I think it was more to expand their product lineup and monetize a part of the gaming industry that they hadn't cracked into yet. Whilst researching, I found this incredible review of Imagine MasterChef by Keza MacDonald, and I think it sums up very neatly how I feel about the Imagine series. If you have a little girl who's been bored of Nintendogs for a while now, for God's sake, get her Mario or Phantom Hourglass or something similarly simulating and worthwhile, not this depressing, mildly exploitative, focus group designed shelf filler. It's not a terrible game, but it's the ideas behind these market research casual games that make me balk. This might keep your daughter happy for an hour or so, but she deserves better. Whilst I can sit here and chastise Ubisoft and inadvertently also the third-party companies that worked on these games, what would I do if I was in Ubisoft's shoes? What do I think that the Imagine game series needed to actually be better and of value? I will keep this brief because I feel like this video is already quite long. Some of these games have such little value and content, it's actually laughable. Like imagine releasing a title and it only having an hour and a half gameplay time. I think it's obvious that they needed to spend much more time fleshing out individual games and giving them actual quality content, storylines, characters, instead of just pushing out as many titles as they could in mediocre or bad states. I'd also come up with a lot more provoking and stimulating gameplay rather than just point, click, and sliding of the stylus. Like, have some puzzles in there that go beyond picture sliding. Have some platformers, some like action moments, especially for like the detective and zookeeper games. Like there could be some really cool opportunities for some like top-down action moments, or not, it doesn't even have to be combat. And lastly, I would also make the content specific for age groups smaller than 6 to 14. I've mentioned a couple of times before and spoke about it, but I do think it's a key part as to why the Imagine series is so insulting. Even with the titles that they've released, you can clearly tell which ones are aimed at an elder audience or a younger audience. So, for example, I would probably have 3 tiers of ages. The original fashion designer game is clearly made to keep and captivate the attention of a younger audience. Imagine ballet dancer and games similar to it are for like a mid-tier audience, kind of like the 9 to 11 age bracket, I would say. And then you have games like My Secret World, which literally has literal teenagers in the trailer playing, so it's clearly aimed at a older age range, so the like 11 to 14 age. And it's not hard to do that, but I imagine it was more of they wanted to make as much money as they could and didn't want to limit the audience that they could sell to by slapping an age range on it. And why would I do all this? Because, to quote McDonald, she deserves better. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. I am hoping to make more of these girls in gaming history videos / video essays. So if that is something you would like to see, please let me know by liking this video and subscribing if you would like to see more. Also, check me out on my other socials. I make other girls in gaming content over on there, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.